Got it.
All right, this is Roger L. Faber. His birth date was November 5th, 1945. He served in Vietnam in the U.S. Army. The highest rank he achieved was SP5E5, and today is the 29th of May, 2016, and Mrs. Rosendahl is here recording, and this interview is being conducted for the Veterans History Project at the Library of Congress. So, I guess I'd just like to start with, where were you born? Were you born here in Grand Rapids?
I was born in Grand Rapids. I was born and raised here. I left after college and got a job in Wisconsin, and then when I got drafted, I moved around and then settled back in Grand Rapids. So I'm really from Grand Rapids.
Cool. So, so you moved to Wisconsin for college?
Well, after college, I had a job. My first job was in Madison, Wisconsin. And we got married in September of 1966. And I moved there that month, and then I got drafted in May of 67, so only, 6 or 7 months later. And then we moved back to Grand Rapids. And my wife stayed back with her parents while I went to basic training, AIT in Vietnam. Then together we went back to Fort Polk after I got back from Vietnam.
Okay. How long did basic training take?
I want to say it was about 8 weeks. I don't remember it specifically, but I think it's about an 8-week time slot for basic training. And that's exactly what it is basic training. Everybody, no matter what job they get in the Army, they go through basic training. You learn how to salute, you learn how to march, you qualify with a rifle, you get to go to the rifle range, you take first aid classes, you do a lot of PT, push-ups and stuff like that, a lot of running. They get you in shape. Because when I went in, I weighed 150 pounds, really thin. And when I got out of basic and AIT, the two, I weighed 175. Wow. So they put 25 pounds on me, not because the food was good, but just muscle, and I was in good shape. But then when I came back from Vietnam, I was back to 150. So anyway, yeah, basic was about 8 weeks, and then went directly from there, just took a train ride from Fort Polk, or Louisville, Kentucky, to Fort Knox, Louisville, Kentucky. I took a train down to Fort Polk. I don't know if we went to Baton Rouge or wherever we stopped and took a bus. So. But no leave in between.
So was it hard to leave your wife right after you got married?
Yeah. Oh yeah. But it wasn't. It was something we almost expected at that time, because they were drafting everybody. As long as you were in school, you had a deferment for what they called student deferment, like an S2 or something, but you were a student, so they wouldn't draft you.
Right.
As soon as you got out of school, the school must have notified my draft board that I was done and out. And so I got notice to take a physical within a few months. We were living in Wisconsin, in Madison, but I had to take my physical then in Milwaukee. But so you weren't surprised. It wasn't easy, but it was almost something you expected. So unless you flunked the physical, which you really didn't want to do, you were going to get drafted. That's just the way it was back then.
Right.
And now, of course, they have what they call all-volunteer Army, which means everybody that's in there has enlisted for that duty. I didn't. That you could do that then. You could enlist when I went in, but I didn't volunteer for anything. So, yeah.
So you said
Yeah, go ahead.
You said the food in basic training was good. Like, how did that compare to like civilian food?
Oh, they don't put as much attention to it. They don't care really what it really tastes like. It was a variety of foods. and you got a tray. You didn't get a plate. You got a tray. And you eat off the tray. And so everything was different, you know. But the food was okay, and you were so hungry that you ate in basic. And AIT was pretty much the same. AIT, I keep saying that. AIT was Advanced Infantry Training. Okay. And I'll use other acronyms like that. If you don't know what they are, just ask me, because in my mind, AIT is Advanced Infantry Training. So I went from Fort Polk after basic that everybody goes through. Then I was assigned to the infantry and to be trained at Fort Polk, which they did a lot of that. They had to train the infantry there. They had an area they called Tiger Ridge. It was just a part of the base, and that's all they did there. Is they kind of segregated us into a lot of us who were being trained, and that too was 8 weeks of training. And that was just advanced. It was more involved. It was more intense, more running, you know, all that stuff. And that was for 8 weeks. And you pretty much knew where you were going, you know.
Yeah.
Trained me to
Was running the hardest thing you did in training? Or?
I guess I got the most weary of that, because we're out here in Bush area, and they would have a class over here. And then we were going to have another class, so we would run over here, and we'd have a class. And we were going to have a third class, and we'd run back here. And the running was just part of the training. It was to get us in shape, the endurance. That was, I don't know if the toughest. It was the thing I got the most tired of. Just thought, enough is enough.
Right.
I'm done. I'm sick of this. Didn't matter, but I was tired of it. I didn't have the best attitude in the Army, and that's partly how I got in. I'll share this with you. I think that's how I primarily got in the infantry. When you went in basic training, then the first things you did is you took a whole bunch of tests, written tests. And I tried hard on those tests. I thought that if you do good, you'll probably get a better job. I mean, that's what I thought. Right. And so then I tried hard, but they didn't tell you how you did. We would go into basic training, and they would call out certain individuals and say, well, you qualified to go to electronics school, but you'll have to stay in the Army another year. Well, I wasn't interested. And then it would be something like warrant officer school. A warrant officer is an officer with a very specific specialty. It could be a helicopter pilot, or it could be a supply expert, you know, but a very specific thing that he would be an officer of. That wasn't interested, because again, you'd have to be in quite a bit longer. I was okay giving them 2 years, but not 3 or 4 or 5. Well, several times. And other OCS was Officers Candidate School. Well, again, just wasn't interested in spending more time. So finally, just 2 of us got called out, and they said, well, we can arrange to have an appointment to West Point for you 2, because you had scored high enough. And but again, that would have been 4 years at West Point and 5 years in the Army afterwards. It just couldn't do it in 2 years. I wasn't interested. Well, as a result, I'm sure that my file, it was noted that I was non-compliant. I just didn't cooperate. I did what I had to do, but I wasn't doing anything more. And so then, at the end of basic training, in the last few days, we got orders to where we had to go next. And my orders said 11 Bravo, 11B. I didn't know what that was, so I went into the orderly room, or the office, but we called it orderly room, that's the office. And I said, what is this? And they said, oh, 11B, 11 Bravo, that's small arms infantry going to Fort Polk. So my wife's grandma, Jerry Ford he was president later, but at the time he was our congressman, and my wife's grandma, kept up a writing letter correspondence with him. Just interesting. And so she writes Jerry Ford and said she didn't think her grandson should be in the infantry. And he did a little checking and sent her a letter back and said, you're right, he probably shouldn't have to be in the infantry, but the Army can assign a person that's drafted to any job they qualify for. Well, infantry, you can hardly not qualify for the infantry, and so that's one of the things I qualified for, and they needed them,
Right.
so I was in it. That's how I got in it, infantry, I believe. By the time I got out of the Army, I thought I had it figured out. What I should have done is I should have signed up for OCS in basic training, that's Officer Candidate School. I was told that when you did that and you went, let's say they assigned you to Fort Polk or wherever they were training infantry officers, whatever fort, and you had to wait for your next class to start, so you're kind of like hanging around. And I was told, you could tell, no, I changed my mind, I don't want to do this after all. At that point, you kind of fall between the cracks, and they would say, well, Faber, what can you do? Well, I said I could be a draftsman. So I thought, then they probably would have sent me to Army Corps of Engineers. But I didn't know that. I did, you learn after you're in a while, you learn how to play with the Army or deal with the Army.
Right.
So anyway, that's a long story. Fort Polk is another nice place. It was used primarily to train guys to go to Vietnam. It's still there, it's still used. Still used for training infantry, I'm sure. So I was there for that 8 months, or 8 weeks. So by that time I went in May, and then, June, July, and then I went August, September. I got finished with Fort Polk, came home for a 30-day leave, and then that put me in line to go to Vietnam in October. So that's how I got there.
So sorry.
No, go ahead.
When you got to Vietnam, like, was it?
Okay.
It was different.
Yeah,
Obviously, so.
I tell you. First of all, we went over on chartered planes like United Airlines or some commercial airlines that the military had chartered, and we left McChord Air Force Base, which is around Seattle, Tacoma, Washington. There's Fort Lewis, Washington is the Army base, and adjacent to that is McChord Air Force Base. Well, the chartered planes went in and out of McChord Air Force Base, so they bussed us over. Whole plane load of GIs, and I don't know what time of day we left or anything like that anymore. I know we crossed the international date line, so all of a sudden we jumped ahead by a day, which was kind of confusing first. And but it was getting dark when we're getting closer to Vietnam, and we stopped, I think, in Hawaii, we stopped in Wake Island, and we stopped in Guam, another island. And then we hit Vietnam, and it was getting dark, and I thought, wow, I was scared. This dark, going into Vietnam in the dark, this is crazy. They'll probably hand me a gun and tell me they'll pick me up in a year. But it wasn't like that. It was, there are lights on at Cam Bay. We went into Cam Bay. Air Force, big airstrip there. And went into Cam Bay, and it was dark, of course, so we put us on buses. They bring us to some barracks, and you just go to sleep, and they'll wake you up in the morning. And that morning I got up, going to go find a chow line to eat breakfast, and there's guys water skiing on the bay. I thought, well, this is pretty nice. This is not so bad. And then you do paperwork like ever for typical Army, do more paperwork, and I had to catch a flight from Cam Bay to Camp Radcliffe near An Khie in Vietnam. And so that was a little bit nastier. We got then do more paperwork. By that, well, the Camp Radcliffe was the home base of the 1st Cavalry. So that was my first contact with the 1st Cavalry. And do paperwork in a barracks for a couple of days before, and I get assigned to Bravo Company, B Company, for the 1st Battalion, 5th Cavalry, 1st Cavalry Division. And doing that, at that time, some guys would come out of the field and go back, and there's always people coming and going on R&R, coming or going. And this guy comes in from the field, and he's a seasoned vet from Vietnam, and about ready to go home. And his helmet had a bullet hole that went through the helmet, steel pot. And he had a little wound on the back of his neck where a piece of the steel pot landed on his neck. That's the only injury he had from it. But it made me pretty scared that this is not, they're not fooling around here. Now I remember that, and then they also, we had our first experience of rappelling from a chopper. Because the 1st Cavalry back then we didn't ride horses, but we traveled in choppers constantly, 3 or 4 times a day in a chopper.
Wow.
Well, I had my first chopper ride, and the first time I rappelled from the chopper, sliding down a rope. So that was something new. And so there's that orientation for a few days, but you're still living and sleeping in the barracks at night. And they're treating you a little bit better than they did in training. And then I had to go out, take a chopper, and brought out to wherever Bravo Company and B Company was, and then I was assigned to a rifle platoon. They were guarding bridges at the time. I want to say Bong Song Valley, but I can't put that on a map anymore, but we were guarding bridges. And there's a bunker on each side of the end of the bridge on the land, and we would walk at night out on the bridge and back and out there and back. And then we get to be, you got to do something. You do this for 2 hours or something. And we would throw hand grenades over the side. We were supposed to do that. I don't know why, but yes, we did. And the idea was to hold the hand grenade for, it was 4 seconds from the time you let the lever go to the time the thing exploded. You had to hold it just for a couple seconds, then throw it so that you tried to get it to explode just as it hit the water and not, at the bottom of the river. I don't know why we did that, but I remember that's what we did. And then the shrapnel would hit the bottom of the bridge. So that was my first experience. And we also, I think it was there, was a chaplain came out. It wasn't Sunday, but a chaplain came out, and we had an interdenominational service. And he couldn't wait to get on the chopper and go back to a base camp. But I remember the boys that were Catholic were walking up to him in confession. And the Protestants, we didn't do that, but we had one service. That's all he did. It was fine. Didn't see him very often, and you never knew what day he would show up. In the field, in the rifle platoon, you want to hear about all this stuff? In a rifle, in the Bravo Company, we were never fully manned, but there's 4 platoons in a company, and there's 3 rifle platoons, and there's a mortar platoon. So every night, we're way out in the bush someplace, and the mortar platoon would find a place to camp, and they're along with the officer and the platoon leader and so on. And they're at this point in the mortar platoon puts up camp, and then one of the rifle platoons, alternating every 3rd night, that rifle platoon would build a perimeter around that core, the center, where the mortar platoon was, and dig a little foxhole just deep enough to sit on the edge and pile the dirt up in front. Build a hooch with two ponchos. And 2 guys, you always worked in a team of 3 on the rifle platoon. So you always worked with this same other 2 guys. So two of you got to sleep and one was awake for an hour and a half or whatever you agreed to, and then you wake up the next guy, and he would have to be awake for an hour and a half, and you could go to sleep, and then the third guy would be awake for an hour and a half, and you go through it again, through the night. So, the other two nights, the one night you'd be with the morgue platoon, under a poncho for protection from the rain. The other two nights you went out in an ambush, and then you just walked out, and whoever was the point man for that time, you would find a good place to set up what you thought was a good place for an ambush, maybe along a creek bed, and so back there you would again lay down just underground, no ponchos, nothing, just in your clothes and boots. You laid down an arm's distance from one of the other guys, and then to the third guy, and then 5 yards over there would be another 3. So you're always working with these same 2 guys, and if I was the first one awake last night, now I'm the second one awake. And then the third night, you're the third one awake. So you rotated everything. You never had the first shift over, or the last one, or the middle one. You never wanted a middle one, but you got it every third night. And so that's what you did every night. 2 nights out of 3 you pulled ambush, and the third night you got to stay with the mortar platoon. And that's the way you lived. And then during the day you'd be on a chopper, you'd make what they call the combat air assault. They'd drop you someplace, and your orders were to walk 5 kilometers in a certain direction. So you did that, and they'd pick you up, and they'd bring you someplace else, and they'd walk 6 kilometers in that direction. It's kind of boring. Well, it was boring, but if you had a firefight, then it changed just like that. But much of the time was really boring. Okay.
Tell what the weather was like.
Yeah,
Weather.
weather.
It was pretty hot, and it was sticky, and there's bugs. Wet, and I think I kind of forgot some a lot of the details. I think it must have rained, at least drizzle, for like 30, 45 days in a row. We were so happy when the sun came out. Again, we had a sunny day. That was really, really nice. And so your clothes were always damp and wet. The boots were wet. You didn't wear socks. I cut my boots off instead of being, like army boots are. I cut them off so that they would be ankle high. And we often had to walk through rice paddies. And the water is not very clean. There would be leeches in there, and those leeches could get through the littlest cracks in your boots. So when you did have a break after that, maybe an hour after you'd been through a rice paddy, you'd always take your boots off, and if you had a leech, you couldn't pull them off because that would pull the skin too, because they're really attached. But you could take a lighter or a match, a cigarette lighter, and heat it, and they would drop off from the heat. They would just let go. Or you take mosquito repellent and squirt them with mosquito repellent, and they would drop off, but you didn't pull them off. I never used mosquito repellent as a mosquito repellent. It was really an oily, thick product, and came in these little plastic bottles. But in the morning, our rifles were all wet, laying on the ground, dirty, and there could even be dirt in the barrel. But in the morning, we would always run through 1 magazine of bullets. That would be 18 or 19 rounds. And they called that, I don't remember, Mad Minute or something like that. But everybody did it at the same time. It was really noisy. And then you would squirt some mosquito repellent in the chamber of your rifle, because it was oily again, and it was kind of a lubricant. Every morning when you get, after you got up, if you were with the mortar platoon or you came back off an ambush, they would bring out chopper with food on it in insulated containers, so you'd have, that's where I got so tired of pancakes, I can't eat pancakes to this day. But often pancakes or scrambled eggs. They were powdered eggs, but they were yellow. And so eggs, there would be coffee. I don't remember any juice. Eggs and pancakes and coffee. Also would come out boxes of ammo, crates of ammo, and you could take boxes and fill we carried each clip or magazine would handle 20 rounds, but we only put in 18 or 19 because otherwise it could jam because it was just spring action, and if that spring got a little crooked because it was too tight, then it would jam. That would be bad. So you never put in 20, put in 18 or 19. And you'd put in 2 regular rounds and then what we call a tracer. And a tracer you could see during the daytime is a glow, orange glow. You could really see it at night, but during the day you could even see it. And you did that just if you could see where you're shooting. You had to have those tracers in there. So anyway, in the morning we got a meal, a hot meal. We got more ammunition only if you needed it. And we got sea rations for lunch. Sea rations came in a carton about this size but deeper, twice as deep, and there would be probably a dozen boxes of sea rations in there, each one a meal. We'd lay that upside down and take the carton off so you couldn't see what was printed on the top, so you didn't know it. And there was maybe a half a dozen different meals. There was I remember scalloped potatoes and pork steak. That was good. There was a spaghetti that was good. That was the main dish. And along with the main dish would come a little can of fruit, like peaches or something, small can, or applesauce. That was good. There would be a little plastic bag with sundry items, like maybe a small toothbrush and a little toothpaste. Maybe some razor blade, toilet paper, salt and pepper, sugar, the little packages of those things. Every day you got another package of that because you got another box of sea rations. Well, we would all walk past this and pick up a box, and we had a big black sergeant. His name was Sergeant Bacon, and he loved ham and lima beans, which very few people like. But that was the main meal, was lima beans and ham in there. And, another thing that was in this little plastic bag was a can opener, because you had to open these cans. Right. So that was handy. And Sergeant Bacon would trade whoever got ham and lima beans, he would trade whatever he got for ham and lima beans. So that was kind of unique and different. There also was ham and eggs chopped. I don't think anybody ate ham and eggs chopped. That was really bad. And then to heat them, we supposedly had what they called heat tablets, or heat tabs. They were about that big and round, and they would burn, but not when they got damp, and so that didn't work so good. But we had C4, which was an explosive that you could, if we had to bring a chopper in and there were trees, we would put C4 around the tree near the bottom, and then a firing cap in there, and a wire and a trigger, and you could blow the tree up so that the tree was gone and they'd get a chopper in. Well, we would take C4, that explosive, it was white, make a ball the size of a pretty good sized marble, and then light it. It didn't explode if you lit it with a match, but it burned, and that's the way you heated sea rations, with C4. But that was lunchtime. And then at supper time, they come back out with chopper, more ammunition if you needed it, and a meal in cafeteria style. You know, you just filed by to get your portion, take what you wanted. And also then you'd get meal. There would be a mail bag, so that you'd get meal at night. Not every day. I can't remember a day the mail didn't come out. That didn't mean you got mail every day. It's just that mail came. Well, that was a day. And then after supper, you kind of waited until dusk, and then if you were in one of the rifle platoons that was going on ambush. He went out on ambush. I had my birthday there. And that was November 5 of 1967. And I turned 22. And that night in the mail, my wife sent a package about once a week. But on that very night, I got the package that had my birthday cake in it, along with a can of frosting that we could smear on the cake. But we had to go on an ambush, and it was fairly late, so we just with a bayonet smeared the frosting on the cake. It wasn't moldy or anything. It was misshaped a little bit, as I remember, because it got banged around, mail bags and everything. But it had a birthday cake, and it was all gone, and we couldn't save anything, so it was gone, and we went on ambush. But that was, it came on my birthday. That was the strange part of that. That was cool. Yeah, that was unique. And then I got, at some point, we were guarding bridges again. We got to do that. You let the infantry do that to give them a break from being in the field. Sometimes we were on QRF, Quick Reaction Force. There's another little story there. But anyway, we'll forget about QRF. We were guarding bridges again, and on bridges between K, Camp Radcliffe, where the CAV was based, and Pleiku, which was another city in Vietnam, and there's a highway. It was barely a two-lane road in between them, but there was all kinds of little Vietnamese buses and motorcycles traveling up and down that road, and with U.S. military, Army vehicles. And we were guarding those bridges, and that was pretty easy duty. And one morning, the truck was going out and would drop off breakfasts at each bridge for the guys that were there. And they'd get over to this point, and then they would come back and they'd pick up the empty containers and go back to K. Well, the truck came out, and I don't know, the driver or another guy said, "Faber, get ready, you have to go back to K when we come back. Be ready to go back." And I thought maybe something happened at home. And then why would they call me back? So I went, but I did. The truck came back. I got on a truck with my rifle and my backpack, and got back to K, Camp Radcliffe. K is the Vietnamese city right by Camp Radcliffe. Got back to Camp Radcliffe and walked in the orderly room. That's the office again, but walked in the orderly room, and this guy says to me, "You got a degree in journalism?" I said, "No." And I was disappointed, and I thought, "Oh, shucks, I might take the next truck back out there." And he says, "Can you type?" I said, "Oh yeah, I can type." And so I ended up, they sent me over and I could be S1 clerk. So that was pretty cool. I still had to carry a rifle around. But I took care of personnel, S1, I don't know what the S stood for, but S1 took care of personnel records. Then there was an S2, I don't know what they did. S3 was intelligence, interrogation, and so forth. I think that was S3. Maybe S4 was supply. I don't remember all this stuff anymore. But I was S1 clerk, which meant that I got to cut orders for guys to go on R&R. I had to cut my own orders to go on R&R whenever not whenever I wanted to. I could only pick one time, but. So then we moved from K, that Camp Radcliffe. We ended up going up the coast further north to some place called Utah Beach, which was right on the beach of the Gulf of Tonkin, a nice sandy beach. And there was my first experience with salt water. I thought, boy, does this look nice? It's all this water. I can take a bath. salt water and soap don't mix. It just turned like a hockey puck in the salt water that there was. Soap, you couldn't get a bubble on it. You wouldn't, it's just like it was worthless soap. But that didn't work, and then I was covered with salt. That was almost worse. But I learned. And then I don't know how long we were there, and then we moved inland to a place called LZ Jane. LZ stands for landing zone, because again, I was still in the first cab, so all these choppers flying in and out. And that was a landing zone. That's where they were at night. They were all kinds of choppers on the ground. I don't know. That's quite a story.
Big adventure.
So after you got to do the new job, the S1? Is that what
S1 clerk. Yeah.
So after that, did you have to go out on ambushes as a pre-boot?
No, I
After
didn't
that, you were
do
done.
that anymore. In fact, this form, what I did is, I don't know where all the information is located on here, but when I got promoted to E5, I don't know where that says, someplace, on May 7th of 68, I was promoted to Spec 5 E5, Spec 5 E5. I changed my MOS, Military Occupation Service, from 11 Bravo to 71 Bravo. 71 being clerk. Because I thought, hey, I don't want to be in it for fiction. I'm going to go do something else. So anyway, that's how my MOS at the time that I was discharged is 71 Bravo versus 11 Bravo, which it was up here. And I did that myself. So then when I went to Fort Polk, the second time, I was at a permanent party location. That's down here someplace. I saw it where I got thrown out of the Army. That's where I had it. I don't know, I guess that's where they sent me. I was in HHC BQT, whatever that was, Command Group, 4th U.S. Army, Honorable Discharge. I was at Fort Polk. There's all kinds of stuff I don't know what it means on here. ETS, expected time of separation. Anyway, I changed my MOS from 11 Bravo, which it was, to 71 Bravo. The 30 behind there indicates your rank. Mine was a Spec 5 or a Sergeant, E5. These are my medals by abbreviation. I think NDSM is National Defense Service Medal. VSM is Vietnam Service Medal. VCM, I think, is Vietnam Commendation Medal. CIB is Combat Infantry Badge. You earn that when you've been in combat as an infantryman for 30 days. You'll see that, that's that rifle with that wreath around it. You'll see that on guys on television sometimes, the CIB. ACM, Army Commendation Medal, I think. Sharpshooter with the M14 rifle. I don't know what 1CG is for M60. M60 is a machine gun, so I must have qualified, but I don't know what that means. And then MM is a marksman with the M16 rifle.
So you were a sharpshooter then?
Yeah, but I wasn't an expert. there was 3 levels. There was marksman, sharpshooter, and expert. My heart wasn't in this stuff much, Chase.
Yeah.
It's okay.
I was there, I was drafted.
Did you tell Jason anything about when you were there during the monsoon? And that's kind of
No.
a human interest story that people find interesting.
About that bunker?
Yeah.
We didn't have radio, listening to that radio. We didn't have television, of course. We were at this LZG. It was a just hilly area with all clay, no vegetation. They probably used Agent Orange to defoliate it
Oh yeah.
before we even got there. And we lived in bunkers in the ground. I don't know who built the bunker, but it was dug out of the ground, and then there was these sheets of metal, perforated metal across the bunker, and then sandbags on that, probably 2 or 3 layers of sandbags. Well, first they put sandbags around the perimeter of the hole, and then 1 layer, 2 layers, I don't know, and then the metal, and then more sandbags on top. This is good protection. And at one end, kind of in one corner, there was a steep dirt ramp down in it. And that bunker was big enough so that there was enough room for 2 cots up against each side wall, and then probably this much space between the cots, a cot there and a cot there. And there was probably 3 or 4 feet at the foot end of the cots, and then that where you went up and down out of there. No door. But one night, didn't know this was going to happen, and I would lay down on the cot